She had handled electric eels hundreds of times, and she had the footage to prove it. But on this particular afternoon in her Louisiana backyard, something went wrong in the first 3 seconds of contact, and nobody in that yard could stop what happened next. What did Grace Thornton feel in the moments her body refused to let go? Grace Thornton had never taken a class on animal handling in her life, and she was proud of it. She said so often, usually while pointing a camera at herself and grinning at the 340,000 people who followed her every move online. Her channel, which she had built over 4 years from a single shaky phone video of a baby eel in a plastic tub, had grown into something she called a movement. She called her followers her eel people, and they called her fearless. Grace called herself practical. She had a way of making dangerous things look simple, and simple things look boring, and she had built an audience on exactly that gap between the two. She lived on a half-acre property outside Shreveport, Louisiana, where the air in summer sat heavy and wet and smelled like cut grass and standing water. Her backyard setup had grown over the years from a single tank on a folding table to a full outdoor handling area with 3 custom-built acrylic enclosures, a camera rig mounted on a fixed overhead arm, and a painted wooden sign nailed above the main tank that read Thornton's Wild Side. She had done brand deals. She had been offered and turned down a spot on a regional cable wildlife show because, she told her followers, she didn't want a producer telling her what she could and couldn't touch. And the people who knew Grace personally described her in ways that sounded like compliments until you thought about them too long. Her neighbor, Dale Fontenot, told a reporter she was the most confident person he had ever met. Her assistant, a 24-year-old named Cody Moe, who had been working with her for 18 months, described her as someone who treated every warning like a suggestion and every suggestion like an insult. Cody had come to her after watching her videos in college. He had a background in biology and had once, carefully, explained to Grace the documented physiology of high-voltage eel discharge. She had listened, nodded, and then filmed herself hand-feeding the eel anyway and posted it with the caption, "Science is great. Instinct is better." On the morning of July 14th, Grace announced to her followers via a short live stream that the day's video would be different. She was going to make bare hand contact with her largest specimen, a 38-inch electric eel she had kept for 2 years and named Volt, in an open water tank. No gloves, no rubber mat, no grounding rod, just her hands and the animal she had worked with for 730 days. She said it would be the most viewed video she had ever posted. She was not wrong about that. She was wrong about almost everything else. Cody arrived at the property at 9:30 that morning, carrying 2 coffees and a feeling he could not name. He had been up late reading again, a habit he had developed since taking the job, and the article he had read the night before was still sitting in his chest like something undigested. It was an account from a field researcher in Brazil who had documented what happened to the muscles of a person in sustained contact with a large electric eel in water. The word the researcher had used, the one Cody kept returning to, was lock. The muscles do not spasm. They do not recoil, they lock. The current instructs them to hold, and they hold, and the person holding the animal cannot open their hand, no matter how loudly their brain is screaming at them to do exactly that. He had thought about texting Grace the link. He had not sent it. Grace was already in the yard when he arrived, adjusting the camera angle on the overhead rig. She was wearing a black tank top and rubber-soled sandals, which Cody noted immediately. He asked if she was going to change into closed shoes. She said the sandals were fine. Mikey asked if she had considered using a grounding mat below the tank. She said it blocked the shot. He handed her the coffee and said nothing else because he had learned that saying more accomplished less. The eel in question, Volt, occupied the largest of the 3 enclosures. The tank held approximately 80 gallons of water and was positioned on a low wooden platform, roughly 18 inches off the ground. Volt was a mature specimen measuring 38 inches in length and weighing close to 4 pounds. Electric eels are not eels at all. They are a species of knife fish, more closely related to catfish than to the animals they resemble, and they are found in the murky freshwater rivers and floodplains of South America. What makes them remarkable, and what made Volt a centerpiece of Grace's channel, is what runs the length of their body. Nearly 80% of a mature electric eel's body consists of specialized cells called electrocytes. These cells function like living batteries stacked in sequence, each one contributing to a charge that builds and releases in fractions of a second. A large specimen can discharge up to 860 volts in a single pulse. That is enough electrical force to stun a fully grown horse, to stop a human heart in its normal rhythm, and to travel outward through water in all directions from the point of contact. What Grace told her audience was that Volt was used to her. What the research literature on electric eels describes is that familiarity does not reduce discharge. The eel does not decide to shock, it responds. When it perceives threat, constriction, or stress, the electrocytes fire automatically. They fire again if the threat continues. They keep firing. A single discharge lasts roughly 2 milliseconds, but when the threat does not go away because the person in contact cannot release their grip, the eel does not stop at one. It fires again and again, and in water, every pulse travels outward, reaching anyone else nearby. Grace had read none of this. Cody had read all of it and said nothing. By 11:40 in the morning, the camera was rolling. Grace leaned over the tank the way she always did, easy and loose, one hand resting on the acrylic edge and the other hovering just above the water's surface. She was talking to the camera. She said Volt had been fed that morning, which she believed made animals calmer. She said she'd done this kind of thing 100 times, which was almost true if you counted approaches that stopped short of full contact. She said the key was confidence, that animals could sense fear, and that she had none. She was smiling when she said it. Cody was standing 6 feet to her left, close enough to be in the wide shot, close enough to see her hand. She lowered her hand into the water slowly. Her fingers made contact with Volt's body just behind the head, which is where the electrical output is highest in a mature specimen. For 2 full seconds, nothing happened. Grace looked at the camera. She said, "See?" And then Volt discharged. The sound was not dramatic. It was a short, dull click, the kind of sound a light switch makes in a quiet room. But Grace's arm went rigid immediately, every muscle from her fingers to her shoulder contracting at once and holding. Her face changed. The smile was gone, and something underneath it surfaced. Not pain exactly, not yet, but recognition, the sudden awareness that something was happening that she could not interrupt. Her body pulled forward as her locked arm dragged her toward the water. She did not fall in so much as she was guided there, her face going under at the same moment. Volt discharged a second time. Cody moved without thinking. He grabbed Grace by the back of her tank top with both hands and pulled. The third discharge hit him through contact, a jolt that traveled from Grace's wet skin into his palms and up through his forearms. His hands opened involuntarily, and he fell backward onto the grass, his vision going white at the edges, his heart stuttering in a way he would describe later as a door slamming inside his chest. He lay on his back in the yard and could not get up. He could see the camera rig overhead, the fixed arm, but the lens pointing down at the tank. He could hear the water. He called out Grace's name twice. She did not answer. He rolled onto his side and got to his knees and called 911. The dispatcher asked him to describe what had happened, and he did, and she told him not to touch Grace or the water again under any circumstances. He said he understood. He knelt in the grass 12 feet from the tank and watched the surface of the water and said Grace's name again. The camera continued recording. Volt moved slowly to the far end of the tank and was still. Emergency services arrived 11 minutes later. Responders assessed the scene from a distance before approaching. Grace was found partially submerged, unresponsive, her right arm still inside the tank. Volt was isolated before responders made physical contact with Grace. Resuscitation began at the scene. Grace Thornton was pronounced dead at University Health Shreveport at 1:22 in the afternoon. She was 44 years old. The official cause of death listed by the coroner was cardiac arrest, secondary to repeated high-voltage electrical discharge, with drowning noted as a contributing factor. The coroner's report documented that Grace had received multiple discharge events in rapid sequence, consistent with sustained physical contact during an active threat response by the animal. Her heart had stopped before her face entered the water. The footage from the overhead camera rig was seized by authorities within hours. It has never been publicly released. Cody Moe was treated for secondary electrical exposure and discharged the same evening. He gave a full statement to investigators and did not return to the property afterward. In interviews conducted months later, he described the moment he grabbed Grace as the only decision he made clearly that day, and said the one he could not explain was the decision he made the night before, not to send her the article. Louisiana wildlife investigators reviewed Grace's permits and found none. She had no certification, no liability insurance, no emergency response protocol on file, and no record of contact with state wildlife authorities beyond a written warning issued 14 months earlier regarding an unlicensed reptile enclosure on the same property. She had not responded to that warning. The state had not followed up. Her social media accounts were memorialized by the platform within a week of her death. Her final video, shot 3 days before the incident, had 2.1 million views. Comments remained open for 6 days before her family requested they be closed. Cody later said Grace would have hated that. She always wanted to hear what people thought. The eel did not perform for the camera. Grace did, and that was the last thing she ever got wrong.